Somewhere along the way, you stopped expecting good things from people. Maybe it's because you've been hurt before, betrayed, let down, or maybe you know someone like that. Someone who always waits for the worst to happen and say, "See, I told you so." Here's what nobody tells you. That pattern, that constant bracing for disappointment is not just a bad habit, it's a psychological trap. And today, we're going to get to the bottom of why it happens and what it's actually doing to your life, and most importantly, how to get out of it. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you won't just understand the psychology behind it, but you'll recognize the trap immediately. So here's the question I want you to sit with. If expecting the worst is supposed to protect you, why do people who do it feel more anxious and not less? Think about that. You'd assume that anticipating danger keeps you safe, that bracing for impact means you never get blindsided. But what if the bracing itself is the injury? What if the armor you've put on to protect your heart is the very thing that's slowly suffocating it? Here's what most people believe. Expecting the worst is wisdom. You are street smart. It's learned caution from a world that's taught you hard lessons. And you know what? They're not entirely wrong. But here's the part that's missing. Neuroscience tells us that the human brain is already wired for threat detection. It's called the negativity bias. Your brain processes negative events up to 5 times more powerfully than positive ones. So if your brain is already doing that work automatically, what happens when you consciously pile more negative expectation on top of it? You don't get protection, you get a brain in permanent red alert. You get stress hormones that, like cortisol, flooding your system, relationships that corrode before they begin, a nervous system that can't tell the difference between a genuine threat and a friend who's just running late, for example. We've been calling it caution, but science calls it hypervigilance. In our Christian faith, our faith calls it a spirit of fear. And that's not who we are meant to be. I'll reference 2 Timothy chapter 1. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. A sound mind, not a suspicious one, not a fortified or barricaded one. And that's not a small thing. That's a direct contradiction of what most people think is keeping them safe. Let me tell you about Jackie. Jackie grew up watching people she trusted leave. Her father, a best friend in secondary school, a partner who promised forever but stayed for only 3 years. By the time she was in her late 20s, Jackie had built an extraordinary internal system, a lie detector for everyone she met. She called it intuition. Her therapist called it something else. Because here's the thing about Jackie. She was never wrong. Every relationship she entered, she found evidence of betrayal. Every friendship had a crack. Every colleague had an agenda. But was she finding the truth or creating it? It's not the people who let Jackie down. This is what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's more destructive than any one person could ever be. When you expect the worst from people, you behave differently. You pull back. You test them. You interpret neutral actions as hostile, and people, sensing your guardedness, respond with distance, which you then read as confirmation. See, I knew they couldn't be trusted. The enemy isn't the people. The real villain is in fact the story you've been telling yourself so long that it has started to write your reality. The moment Jackie understood this, the moment she saw the mechanism, everything changed, and it can change for you too. Let's delve deeper into the 5 psychological roots of negativity bias. Point 1. Attachment wounds. The very first relationship you ever had with your parent or caregiver set the template for every relationship that followed thereafter. Psychologist John Bowlby called this attachment theory. If your early bonds were unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, your brain learned love is unreliable, and so it created a strategy. Expect less. Be ready for withdrawal. Don't get too close. That was smart then, when you were small and had no other options. But you're not a child anymore, and that strategy is running in the background of every adult relationship you have, like an app you forgot to close, draining your battery. The work here isn't about blaming your parents. It's about recognizing what may have been a coping mechanism as a child and choosing to change it. Point 2. The anxiety expectation loop. Have you ever noticed that the thing you fear most tends to be the thing you focus on the most? That's not coincidence. That's the anxiety expectation loop. When we're anxious, our brains go on search mode, looking for evidence that our fears are justified. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. You're not perceiving reality, you're curating it. Every piece of evidence that fits your worst case scenario gets amplified, and every piece that contradicts it is dismissed, explained away, or simply never noticed. The result? A perfectly curated case file proving that yes, people are dangerous, and no, you can't trust anyone, presented by your own brain to your own brain. That's the loop. And the exit? It starts with noticing when you're building the case and asking yourself, what am I doing? And slowly, with time, you close the loop. Point 3, the spiritual deficit nobody talks about. A lot of what we call psychological dysfunction has a spiritual root. When someone has no anchor, no transcendent source of identity, worth, or security, their sense of safety has to come entirely from other people. And people can be unreliable, naturally. So the person with no spiritual foundation ends up in permanent relational anxiety. But when your identity and security are rooted in something that doesn't change, a God, one whose love casts out all fear, the perception shifts. You can engage with people from a place of fullness instead of scarcity. This is the difference between someone who says, I need you not to hurt me, and someone who says, I choose to trust you, knowing I'll be okay either way. Science explains the mechanism, faith reframes the foundation, and our behavior, that's where the two meet. People who have a strong sense of internal unconditional worth, whether from faith or a religious community, are statistically less likely to develop anxious attachment and negative expectation patterns. The data and the theology are pointing at the same thing. Your security cannot live entirely in other people. Point 4, trauma shadow. Unresolved trauma doesn't stay in the past. It takes part in your present. This is the thing about psychological wounds. They don't just leave a scar. They can't stay open. And every new situation that resembles the original wound, even slightly, triggers the same alarm, the same bracing, the same here we go again. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it demonstrates how trauma physically rewires the brain's threat detection system. It's not that trauma survivors are pessimistic by personality. Their brains have been structurally reorganized around the expectation of danger. This isn't weakness. This is biology responding to lived experience. But there's hope, and here's what matters. The brain can be rewired. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to form new neural pathways, is real, documented, and deeply hopeful. What was learned can be unlearned. What was broken can be rebuilt. You are not your wounds. You are not what you do with them. Point 5, your identity. Here's the deepest truth about why people expect the worst from others. It is not about other people at all. It's actually about what you believe about yourself. Because if deep down you believe you are someone who deserves to be abandoned, you will find abandonment everywhere. If you believe that good things never last for you, you will unconsciously sabotage them when they arrive. If you believe you are fundamentally not enough or unlovable at the core, you will spend your life collecting evidence to prove it. The expectation of the worst from others is almost always a projection of the worst we fear about ourselves. And this is where faith, science, and behavior intersect most powerfully. Because the work of healing isn't just therapy or habit change, as important as those are, it's identity reconstruction. It's answering the question, who am I really? And is that person worthy of love? Psalm 139 makes a beautiful reference to the fact that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, not accidentally, not provisionally, fundamentally, inherently, and irreversibly worthy. When that belief becomes the operating system, everything else changes. Your expectations of others rise, not because they have changed, but because you have. So let's come back to where we started. Why do people expect the worst? Because their brains are wired for threat? Because early wounds taught them that love is unconditional? Because trauma reorganized their alert systems? Because anxiety filters out the good and amplifies the bad? and at the deepest level because they haven't yet believed the truth about who they are. But there's hope. None of that is permanent. The brain rewires, attachment patterns shift, wounds heal. Slowly, with the right support, beliefs change, and a different story is possible. And here's what the word might actually look like. 1. You notice the pattern. When you catch yourself bracing, ask, is this a real signal or an old response to an old wound? 2. Challenge the curation. When you're building a case against someone, actively seek contrary evidence. What are you not seeing? 3. Go to the root. Work with a therapist if you can. The surface behavior is never the real issue. 4. Find your anchor, whether that's faith or spirituality that encourages deep self-reflection. Build a source of security that doesn't depend on people showing up perfectly. 5. Practice small trust. You don't flip from guarded to open overnight. Start small. Let someone be right about a small thing. Let someone in by 1 degree. Notice what happens. Because here's the thing about Jackie, the one we met at the beginning of this story. She did the work. She found a therapist. She found her faith. And she found, slowly, awkwardly, with setbacks, that not everyone was the villain. That some people were just people, imperfect, trying, worthy of a chance. And so are you. If this video hits close to home for you or someone else, please share it. You never know who needs to hear this today. And if you want to go deeper on how trauma rewires the brain and what science says about actually healing it, you'll want to stick around for the next video. I'll see you then.